This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states.
If fashion is your thing, eBay is it. eBay's where I find all my favorites, from handbags to iconic streetwear, all authenticated. For real. This time, a little Supreme, some Gucci. I even have that vintage Prada on my watch list. That's why eBay's my go-to for all my go-tos. Yeah, eBay. The place for new, pre-loved, vintage, and rare fashion. eBay. Things people love.
Welcome to Gabfest Reads for the month of April. I'm John Dickerson, one of the hosts of Slate's Political Gabfest. My guest today is Maggie Smith, the author of Dear Writer, Pep Talks and Practical Advice for the Creative Life. Maggie draws on her 20 years of teaching, as well as her life as a poet and author, to break down creativity into 10 essential elements, which are, to my mind, the 10 essential elements of life: wonder, vision, play, surprise, vulnerability, restlessness, tenacity, connection, and hope. We talk about Maggie's creative process, the importance of staying porous, and a great deal more. So here's our conversation. I hope you enjoy. So, Maggie, I've been a longtime fan of both your work and also just the way you move through the world. So I'm delighted to get a chance to talk to you. Let me start with the choice you made in Dear Writer to break it down by or divide it into sections based on attributes. First, that choice, and then the ones you chose.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I think I'm walking the walk because I wrote an earlier draft of this book a few years ago that didn't have those 10 ingredients at all. And then when coming back to the draft, I looked at it and I thought, 3 years later, I wouldn't write the book this way. I would re-envision it entirely. And so after getting a lot of questions over the years that basically boiled down to how do you do what you do? Like, what's the secret sauce? I thought, well, if creativity had a recipe, and I realize the recipe is different for all of us, but for my recipe, what would the ingredients be? And so I made a giant list on a legal pad of like every word I could think of that came to mind when I thought about what it means to make a thing and then to shepherd it into the world. And I ended up boiling it down to 10, but I think each of them has a lot of words kind of tucked inside of it.
Yeah, definitely. All those other words you chose that you didn't separate it, they're all in there too.
They're in there, yeah.
So when you say walking the walk, you mean you were basically following what you end up in the book talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think I tell my own students, like, revision and editing are different. Revision is re-seeing, revision, right? So when you come to a draft, it doesn't matter if it's the first draft or the 50th draft. My goal is always to approach it with everything's up for grabs kind of mindset and to look at it and see what I want to change. And in the case of this book, I wanted to change everything. And so I rewrote it.
So imagine I'm a writer, and later I want to make the case that this isn't a book just about writing, because as you say, life is a creative act. And therefore, people who think this is just advice about writing or advice just about poetry, I disagree. But and maybe there aren't any of those people, in which case I find myself disagreeing with myself. Imagine, though, you're in the middle of a creative act and you think, oh my God, am I really going to toss aside what I've been working on for 3 years and go down this new route? Why is there any chance that this new route has any more validity than the ones I've been following for the last 3 years?
Well, this is when we trust our guts, isn't it? Courage isn't one of the 10 that I landed on, but I think that courage is tucked inside vulnerability, and courage is tucked inside tenacity. It's tucked inside a lot of the other ingredients. And really, it comes down to, when do I know a thing is done, like really done and ready to send into the world? When I don't see things I want to change. It's not when my editor thinks it's done. It's not when marketing thinks it's done. It's not when my best friend thinks it's done. It's when I can look at it and I'm not dissatisfied with it anymore. And so, sometimes it means scrapping a lot.
And now I'll make the opposite argument. So were you surprised after 3 years that you had gotten to a place where you thought, wait, I've got to revise this?
No, not really. I mean, I oftentimes will even just draft a poem or an essay and put it aside and sometimes forget about it or just, put it on my desktop and come back to it. And it might be 3 weeks later or 3 months later, or frankly, 3 years later, depending on what I've got going on in my life. And it never ceases to amaze me that I am bringing all of those new experiences to bear on that draft. Like the work has been sitting there waiting for me, but I've shown up to the work a kind of a different person than I was when I left it. And to me, it's actually the opposite of discouraging. I find that so exciting because we never stop growing, right?
Right. In fact, what I was working towards is whether maybe it's actually the opposite of my original argument, which is it's a sign that it's going well. It isn't like you'd rather maybe to be done with it. I don't know, have a book in the world. That's nice. But I guess what I'm asking is how much is surprise, to the extent we define this as surprise, a necessary ingredient? And if you've been working on something and you haven't been surprised by it, is that a signal?
I think that's a bad sign. Yeah. I mean, that's when you're doing something and it starts to feel kind of rote. That's not good. I mean, if I made things and it was easy and then it always turned out the way I expected or planned, I think I'd stop making things, to be quite honest, because it would feel like assembly line creation. And that's not why I do it. Like I actually show up to this work expecting the unexpected. That's the fun.
One of the phrases I like the most is when you talk about doing something every day in the service of writing. Doing something in the service of writing is not necessarily writing for those who... So explain the distinction and why you think it's important, because I then want to talk about your wonderful and to me surprising view about when one should write. But what does it mean to work in the service of your writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the advice I got as a young writer was you need to be sitting in the same chair at the same time every day, working for either a period of time or a number of words. And then you can get up and be done. And when I had like 2 little kids and now I'm a single parent, I can barely shower uninterrupted. So am I really expected to sit down at the same time every day and work for 2.5 to 3 hours or 4 hours or 5 hours? My life never really accommodated that. And it made me feel bad, like I wasn't doing it for real if I couldn't live according to that model. So what I talk about in Dear Writer, and I hope it's a sort of permission slip, is every day, poems don't just come knocking every day. I mean, wouldn't that be nice? That's not how my brain works. Sometimes I get an idea and it turns into a poem. Sometimes I get an idea and it doesn't right away. And if nothing's really cooking for me, I can go to an old draft that's giving me fits and work on that, or research some literary magazines I might want to send to, or frankly, like listen to a record or read someone else's book, trusting that I will inevitably have some sort of inspiration or creative breakthrough from spending time with someone else's art. And to me, all of that counts as part of the writing process.
Exactly. And it's wonderful that you free people or show them another routine that does not require that. And also one of the pieces of sustenance I took from this is when you write, whether it's prose or poetry or however you choose to write, that sometimes I must sit in the chair at 8:15 until 8:45 actually becomes a barrier that you kind of, if you think of the war of art, if a barrier that you maybe set up for yourself. And then when it gets to be 8:25 and you haven't started writing, you think, oh, I can't do it today because I didn't meet my 8:15 deadline, so that it actually becomes a barrier.
Yeah. And you kind of psych yourself out.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's something to sort of moving through the world and staying open. And that's kind of what I try to do. And I'm really a believer in that sort of taking care of yourself as a person is taking care of the creator in you. And so sometimes that means having lunch with my mom, or going for a long run, or going to see a matinee because I can, or volunteering at my kid's school. And inevitably, taking care of myself as a person primes me to make things.
And as you argue in the book, you're actually writing, in a sense, every time you do one of those things, because one of the things you preach is attention. Give me or give our listeners your conception of attention, this openness you described. That's what most of these attributes are aimed towards, is kind of putting yourself in the position to engage in the creative act. But attention for you, give me your thoughts about it. And then also, we're in an attention economy, and a time when our attention is stolen from us. There are massive groups of people who spend all day long trying to take our attention from us. And I wonder if your conception of attention has that part of it at all.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, the news cycle sometimes feels like one of those dog shock collars that is consistently going off. And sort of jolting us out of our peaceful lives. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think of the 10 ingredients, there's a reason that attention comes first in the book. I mean, I say attention is a form of love, and I know that as a writer. I know that as a parent. It is different to have a conversation with someone where you're looking them in the eye and nodding along and giving them that kind of verbal feedback, as opposed to having a conversation with someone where you're scrolling your phone and not paying attention to them. People feel that level of inattentiveness. And so moving through the world, I try to stay porous is the best way I can describe it. And that being porous in the world can be painful, frankly, sometimes, because you have to, in order to stay open to the ideas and the inspiration and all of the things that you want to sort of glean from the world and make art from, you can't also filter out all of the other stuff, right? So it means being open to all of it. And that's part of the bargain.
Yes. So I wonder if this then resonates for you, or whether I've misunderstood that. I can't remember who it was who said this, but it was a kind of version of the Serenity Prayer, which was, dear Lord, let me have an experience without having to have an opinion about it. Which is to say, is there a time where the porousness, where you just want to just turn that off for just a second, because as you say, it's overwhelming life. And I don't mean just the news cycle. I mean, just,
Yeah, life.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. And I constantly am reminding myself that I am not, nor do I need to be, a literary first responder.
Oh my God, that's so great.
Right? I don't need to actually process everything in the moment and then spit something out after having metabolized that information quickly. And again, sometimes, yes, it's what I need to do for myself is not be that dialed in all the time, because it is overwhelming.
And then now we're going to switch to tell people what a beauty emergency is.
Well, it was language that I came up with in my home, because just yelling sunrise doesn't bring kids to the window. Yeah, I call these things beauty emergencies. It's really anything that's beautiful and fleeting. That's the criteria, so that you have to come see it right away. And so a sunrise is a great example, because it might be bright pink and orange and purple for a minute, and then it fades. And so if you don't get to the door or the window or the yard fast enough, you're going to miss the best part of it. And so in our house, we talk a lot about that. And it's not unusual even now to hear my 12-year-old son yell beauty emergency. And then somebody else goes, where? And it's back of the house, front of the house, front yard. It's something.
And in order to have that, I mean, so that's its own thing. But you also, what I love about it is you have to stay in kind of a state of readiness. You have to be, ready to be the town crier, which requires you to kind of stay out of the muck, or be alive and open to the presentation of surprise beauty.
Yeah, you have to be attentive. I mean, that's the thing.
Explain why, in fact, we are all poets at birth.
Yeah, I visited an elementary school in my neighborhood to work with second graders years ago. And the textbook had said that poets have special eyes, that they see the world in a poetic way. And so on day one, I had to go into these kids and have them gather on the rug in front of me. And I had to break it to them that poets don't have special eyes, that there's no such thing really as special eyes just for poets, that they all have poet's eyes. We're all born with poet's eyes. And our goal, or our goal should be, to keep them. Like, how do we stay poets if we're all born with the ability to approach the world with wonder and awe and surprise? And like kids, they move through the world kind of reading it like a book that they don't know the plot of or any of the characters. And so everything is totally new to them. They've got that beautiful beginner's mind. And somehow we grow like a callus over that part of ourselves as we get older. We get cynical. We've seen it all before, right? It's not that exciting to walk outside and see a robin in a tree when you're 45, the way it is when you're 5. And so the goal is to stay as fresh in the world as we possibly can, so things don't get old. They stay new.
And that's where I think this is a book. Obviously, if you're a poet or a creative person or a writer, it's just wonderful. But like, what if you're just a human in a world of relentless attention attacks? And by that, for those who are listening, that means everything from advertisements to outrage theater to people in my business who tell you the news is breaking when it's happened for 2 days, or who offer you peekaboo headlines and all the rest of it. Did you feel so for me, I feel like the attributes that you outline and the craft that you're writing about is actually larger than even just writing. Have I suddenly turned this into a self-help book, and do I need to apologize?
No, not at all. And it's funny. I mean, I looked at the category that the book is listed under, and it's self-help. And so I guess whether it's writing advice, which you're helping yourself become a better writer, or just life advice, I think that applies. And what I've found is that really anything that we're talking about making, it also applies to living. So if a student asks me, how do you know when something's done? Or how do you know when you're at the beginning of something exciting? Or how do you have the courage to say the thing you can't bear to say? How do you have the courage to let go or to hang in there? Those are all writing questions, but they're all life questions too, right?
Right. Do you ever feel like, though, so now I'm actually asking advice. Do you ever feel like, because you're a writer, that you gravitate towards writing as the grand analogy or grand metaphor, because to a hammer, everything looks like a nail?
Maybe.
Right? Because at this point, it takes a couple of minutes before I'm like, well, whatever the issue is, it's like writing. So on the other hand, that could be genuinely true.
I do. I think I see things a lot through the lens of writing. I don't know how to do it any other way. That and parenting. Those are the two things I spend most of my time doing. So if I'm ever looking for an analogy or a metaphor, it usually comes out in one of those two areas.
So parenting, right? With advice, does this analogy hold for you? So in a great piece of writing, even if it's a newspaper article, well, not a newspaper article, any great piece of creative writing, you leave room for the audience, right, to inhabit, and with your poems particularly so. We get drawn in, and now we're participating somewhere between your text and our lives. We're in some crazy space that you've drawn us into to have this experience. Is that to you anything like effective advice with kids, which is to say, the most explicit, straightforward, on-the-nose advice is actually not so useful? In the same way, the most explicit, straightforward, on-the-nose piece of poetry would not be that evocative.
I agree with that. I mean, I think for the most part, if my kids ask me for advice about something, I am much more likely to turn to them and say, what do you think? Right? Instead of being like, well, this is what you should do. I tend not to give my students a lot of prescriptive advice. I want to ask them questions and kind of draw them out and meet them where they are. And same with kids. And the other thing is, frankly, writing something and sort of shepherding it into the world is not that different in spirit from having a child. Like, my books are mine and they're not. My kids are mine and they're not. The quickest way to kill a piece of writing is to think you know what it's doing and what it's capable of and what its limitations are and what its possibilities are. The quickest way to shut down your child is to tell it what to do. Right? Like, oh, well, you're going to be a swimmer because I was a swimmer. You're going to be a writer because I was a writer. And you're going to get these grades. And you're going to major in this in college. And you're going to live in this part of the country. And you're going to vote this way. We're just stewards here. We're just stewards.
John Prine used to say, write a song, get a piece of paper, write down the song, and then take out all the words that shouldn't be there. So what you're describing to me is a kind of restraint. And I feel like basically parenting and writing, it's the same thing. Going back to the writing process, give me your feeling about that idea of restraint, the creating room, leaving room, and where's that? What's your feeling about that? And where's that come in for you in the process?
Yeah. I mean, I think a piece of writing isn't really complete until it has a reader. And so when I'm working on it, I'm part of the equation, but I'm not the whole thing. And so I'm always thinking about, how do I leave enough room for the reader to participate in this thing, which means not spoon feeding them, not overloading it with exposition, treating the reader as if they are, because they are, as savvy and intelligent, if not more so, than I am, so that when I hand it to them, they have some skin in the game, frankly.
Can it be rewarding if a reader comes up to you and completely, well, I don't want to use the word right and wrong, but has an interpretation of something you've written that is really
unintended?
Is that a sign that the poem has been a smashing success? Because they've gone in deep, even if they've gone in deep in a very surprising and perhaps even insane way.
It has happened. I don't know if that would mean it was a smashing success. I mean, I guess, like, I don't know how to measure the success of a poem.
It's a crazy question,
right? It's not how many people have read it. It's not how anthologized it is. I think maybe the best measuring stick for how successful any piece of art is how much it moves a single person. So if a single person is greatly moved, even if they, according to me, misinterpret, it's kind of none of my business, because my work is done as soon as I finish it and send it out into the world. And the relationship that people have with the things that I've made, that's between them and the work, not between them and me.
This episode is sponsored by Quince. Vacation season is nearly upon us. This year, it's time to treat yourself to the luxe upgrades you deserve with Quince's high-quality travel essentials at fair prices. Like many of you, I love a carry-on. I love not having to check a bag. It reduces travel anxiety. It saves time at the airport. And that's why I was so excited to discover that Quince offers first-class quality carry-on suitcases at affordable prices. They're sleek and beautiful, and they're also incredibly practical, featuring hard-shell exteriors and 4 wheels for easy transport. And the best part is that all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. By partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes the savings on to us. So for your next trip, treat yourself to the luxe upgrades you deserve from Quince. Go to quince.com/gabfestreads for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/gabfestreads to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/gabfestreads. This episode of the Gabfest is brought to you by Discover. Hey, Gabfest listeners, here's some scoop for you. So what is it, you ask? It's that Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. Now, before anyone goes suggesting this is just a rumor, know that there's actual proof this kettle of tea is not only piping hot, but 100% true. So yeah, sometimes it pays to be a little nosy. but it always pays to discover. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report. Learn more at discover.com/credit card. This episode of the Gabfest is brought to you by Discover. Hey, Gabfest listeners, here's some scoop for you. So what is it, you ask? It's that Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. Now, before anyone goes suggesting this is just a rumor, know that there's actual proof this kettle of tea is not only piping hot, but 100% true. So yeah, sometimes it pays to be a little nosy, but it always pays to discover. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report. Learn more at discover.com/credit card.
To realize the future America needs, we understand what's needed from us to face each threat head on. We've earned our place in the fight for our nation's future. We are Marines. We were made for this.
This episode is brought to you by Nerds Gummy Clusters, the sweet treat that always elevates the vibe. With a sweet gummy surrounded with tangy, crunchy nerds, every bite of Nerds Gummy Clusters brings you a whole new world of flavor. Whether it's game night, on the way to a concert, or kicking back with your crew, unleash your senses with Nerds Gummy Clusters.
What does it feel like when you've arrived with a poem? When you think it's quote unquote done?
There's almost nothing better than that feeling for me. Like, I love the working on it when it's kind of giving me fits. I love having like little mini breakthroughs with a piece of writing when I figure out like, oh, it's supposed to look like this, or, oh, the beginning is the end. But that feeling when I'm satisfied with it finally, and it seems to be doing the work it came to do, and I'm kind of getting out of its way. It's an egoless process, frankly. Like it's really about getting out of the way and loosening my white-knuckled hold on the thing as much as possible. And that, for me, that's a really thrilling feeling.
Yes, back to parenting, getting out of the way.
That's exactly right.
When you talked about when you're working something that's giving you fits, is that type 1 fun, which is to say it's joyous in the moment? And I know you write about joy and the necessity of joy and for as a creative act. And, I'm about to go to a meeting in a half an hour, and I try to remember that before going into every meeting too, which is to say joy is a crucial ingredient of life. But are you having joy when it's giving you fits, or is it type 2 fun where you have joy when you have climbed the mountain and look back down on the fit that you solved?
No, I think I'm type 1.
Oh, no.
I think I like, yeah,
How do you
I know.
do that?
It's alarming, isn't it? I really love creative problem solving. I love, and I think it comes really from, if confidence is self-trust, right? When I'm in the middle, I'm in the weeds in a piece of writing. I mean, it could be a poem or it could be a novel. Like, it doesn't matter the size. When I'm in the weeds, I'm still really energized by the feeling of being in the weeds because I trust myself to get out of the weeds. And I'm excited about how I'll do it, even if I don't know how I'm going to do it yet.
Right, which is the surprise will come, and that lets you know you're on the right road. So when did you was there a moment, not like it was Tuesday afternoon in 1997, but was there a moment when you got to what I think I hear you describing, which is, I will embark upon this journey because however difficult it is, I know I will be able to work my way through it. And that trust then is so great because you're building power bars for yourself to make the actual journey. Like, no, it's this so great. So when did that happen?
Early on, because I don't think you keep doing it if you don't enjoy the good trouble of it. I mean, I just don't know anybody. I started writing poems when I was 13 or 14 years old. I would have stopped very quickly because it wasn't easy then. And it's not easy now. And I think that's one of the things that I really wanted to talk about in this book. There's a misconception that somehow if you start something, by the time you get 30 years into your creative practice or your job or your sport or whatever the thing is, that suddenly it becomes easy. And for me, writing a poem now is just as challenging as it was 30 years ago. I'm not scared of the challenge. I'm really energized by the challenge.
And that's why I love the fact that you started our conversation by saying you were walking the walk by revising this after 3 years, because it means you are still engaged in the process and, in fact, taking instruction from yourself in a book about giving instruction to people in the process, which is in a sense, it's proof of concept, which is that we can't, and I do obviously an very, very different kind of writing, but do writers or do people in creative acts kind of constantly have to be reminded? And is that is that just the way it goes, of kind of these core ideas?
I think so. And I think the process is the process. And there is no point, at least I have not reached the point, maybe I'm wrong, but from my experience, there's no point at which we become exempt from the messiness. And frankly, it's uncomfortable to not know how you're going to find your way through a process. I don't care if the process is a piece of writing or not. It's uncomfortable. And there is no amount of experience that exempts us from that discomfort. So if you don't enjoy that discomfort, you're not going to keep up with a creative practice. You actually have to love making things more than you love having made them.
Say that one more time, because it's so important.
Yeah, you have to love making the thing, the act of making the thing, more than you love the feeling at the end where you look back and say, oh, I made that thing. You have to enjoy the process more than you enjoy, and I hate the word product, but I'll use it here. You have to enjoy the process more than you enjoy patting yourself on the back about having a product that you created.
Yeah.
I mean, the most fun is the making of the thing. Once the book is done for me, I'm so ready to send it off and just start something else.
Yeah.
Because I want that feeling again.
There's another line that feels adjacent to this at the end of which chapter is this? This is on vision. If you don't do your work, it won't exist. Make sure that it does. What I wonder sometimes about lines in this book and the inspiration that arrives in the creative process is whether we all kind of need one of, let's say, 24 lines of guidance, inspiration, reminder, but at different times in wherever we are. So in other words, sometimes you need to be told what a songwriter friend of mine, Ty Greenstein, used to say, I just have to let myself suck. And that for her was like, that's how you start. So that was the line that was really important for a little while for her. I don't know if it still is. Do you find that in your process over the years that at different times you've required kind of different key pieces of advice that are in this book differently?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think after my poem Good Bones went viral, I had a complete block where I did not know how to write poems anymore because I thought now there are too many people watching. I'd always felt like I was writing to 10 other poets in the United States. And it wasn't that scary to send my work out to 10 other poets. But suddenly there were millions of people reading these things. And I thought, oh no, they have expectations. And now they want all my poems to sound like this and to address big global issues. And how do I keep going? And I had a professor and a writer friend who said, forget about all that. You need to go into that quiet place inside yourself to work and forget about audience. Write for yourself. You're the audience. That advice wouldn't have been useful to me in the same way at a different part in the process. That was absolutely post having written and published something and have it blown up advice. And so, yeah, there are different moments, I think, in Dear Writer that will apply to different sort of stages in the process for different people.
One of the things that, so this is a process question, which is mostly just my own personal curiosity. So in the book, you offer your first scribblings of the poem that later became How Dark the Beginning. So, in your handwritten notes here, you have some of your writing has they're not really parentheses; they look like carrots. Is that so it reads to me like these are particular kinds of notes to yourself. Am I overreading something, or is this a part of your style?
That's a part of my style. I tend to bracket or caret or use parentheses around things if I'm not quite sure if it belongs. It's almost like an aside.
Yes, it also felt like, so at one point, one of them says, and I call bullshit. It felt like, and I'll joyfully stumble in and get this wrong. If it felt like you were saying, okay, here's the destination of this idea. I'm going to call bullshit. It might take me 4 months to do that without writing it using those specific words. But
Yes.
I want to capture that sentiment.
Yeah, those notes, I mean, I write everything longhand first, and it's always, it's shorthand because the idea has come to me and I have to get it out as quickly as possible. So it looks like a total mess. And again, like I can let myself suck early on, right? Like a lot of the language on those notebook pages that are scanned into Dear Writer, that language didn't make it into even the first draft of the poem itself, let alone the final draft, but it's there as sort of placeholder text for me to remember why I was sort of dragged to the page in the first place.
Yeah. How long do you think, or do you know, have you nursed a snippet or an idea or a fragment before you've actually worked it and gotten the anvil out and hammered it into a piece of finished writing?
The longest I know of is 9 years. There's a poem in my book, Goldenrod, that I began when my daughter was a baby, and I finished it. I finished it when she was like a tween.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And did you come back to it a lot and keep worrying it, or did you just like return to it after a long 9-year hiatus?
No, I keep a folder on my desktop, on my laptop, that's just sort of problem children, just drafts that I don't know quite what to do with, and so I save them, and then I just trust future me, whether that's me in a week or a month or a year, to come back and see something. And oftentimes I'll just open one of those folders, again, like things to do in service of your writing. If I don't have a new idea, I'll go to that folder and be like, okay, what's in here? Sometimes I don't even remember writing this stuff.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, I know that's mine. It's on my computer, but I don't actually remember composing it.
Is the file's name Problem Children?
Yeah, it
Nice.
is.
I have a writer friend who talks about bad girlfriends, which is you keep loving the thing, and you keep buying it flowers, and it just will not return the affection. And his argument is essentially at some point you have to just make peace with it's not gonna return the love.
Commit or let go.
Yeah. How do you capture your, you write about this in the book, but since some people will know I have an obsession with notebooks, I know you write on legal pads, but since you are porous in the world, how do you make sure that the things that sneak into the pores at the most weird moments get captured because they're fleeting?
Yeah. Well, these days it's the notes function on my iPhone for the most part, unless I'm driving, in which case it's voice memo. And so if I get an idea for a line or a metaphor or some idea, I will just speak it into my phone. A lot of thumbing notes into my iPhone out in the world and then emailing them to myself later.
I want to take issue with the fact that you write while you're listening to music, because if it has lyrics, how are you writing and staying porous? Because you cannot listen to a Jason Isbell album and write at the same time because you're going to be off.
I can't.
You can't. I'm sorry. It's illegal. You cannot. You cannot.
I
that's
can
amazing.
and do.
How do you do it?
I have no idea. I don't know. A lot of my writer friends can listen to instrumental music, but cannot listen to music with lyrics. And a lot of people need silence or like coffee shop din. I think it's because I started listening to music when I was writing as a teenager. And so it's just part of my process. I think it's almost like I'm busying part of my brain with the music, and it frees up a different part of my brain to receive the ideas.
Yeah.
I have no neuroscience to prove that. It's a hunch.
I think it's so great. Just as I also admire your ability to kind of not get captured by the I must write at 8:15 in the morning. Was one of the things I took from that is when I was working on my last book, I tried to do that, which is to say, if you any interstitial moment when you're waiting in the grocery line or you're in a cab, or you have to write. So to try to break, so I carry notebooks. And what ended up happening, what I remembered or felt from what you were writing is actually, if you take that little moment, it can, by the momentum of its own creativity, expand out. And suddenly you've got a whole moment.
Yes.
You couldn't have scheduled it.
It's like the aperture. I love that. It's like you enter something from the very narrow end. And the beauty of it is that it immediately sort of explodes out into a wider space. That's the genius of it.
What have you learned about teaching creativity over the time that you've been doing it?
That there's not one way to do it. Really. I mean, I think a lot of the advice I got early on was more prescriptive and sort of, frankly, just sort of based on an old model of how people work or should work. And, some of my students are older than I am. Many of them have jobs and families and are, have incredibly busy lives, busier lives than my own. And so a lot of this job is just giving them permission to do things their way and get to the work that only they can do in the world, that anybody else in the room can't quite do what they're doing. And so helping them bring that forth in whatever way, shape, or form, that to me is really exciting.
The current moment we're in, that life over the course of the time you've been teaching has changed. So you can learn things, but then there's something that changes in the way your students of whatever age and whatever form changed over that time. Have they? In other words, I mean, cell phones, of course, or smartphones would be one thing, but have you noticed anything in that regard, which is not you changing, but you've noticed something different in those you talk to about creative writing?
I mean, I would say people in general are more overwhelmed than they were 20 years ago. That's what I notice. I mean, I started teaching. I was actually in my first sort of teaching workshop preparing me to teach creative writing at Ohio State the morning of 9/11. So it's not that I've ever taught in a world that didn't feel incredibly fraught. I haven't. And so does the world feel fraught and are people overwhelmed now? Yes. Were they fraught and overwhelmed 20 years ago? Yes. Were they fraught and overwhelmed 100 years ago before I was writing and teaching? Yes. I mean, we talk so much about harrowing times and like these unusual times. And I will give you that these times do feel quite unusual. I'm ready to live in unprecedented and very precedented times. Like I'm tired of this, but all times have been harrowing for someone and we've made art through it. So yeah.
Which is why that art can sustain us, even if it was written 500 years ago.
Yes.
Because the big things, the kind of stuff you write about in your book, that all existed. And that's why it can be, in fact, even more, right? The old line, if you want to learn something new, read an old book.
Yeah.
Speaking of reading, a couple more questions and then I'll let you go. One is, how do you read a poem?
Slowly. And I read it as a poet, so I read it as a spy. And I think I think writers read as spies the way that musicians listen to music as spies, the way that photographers look at photographs as spies, right? Because we're not always just engaging with it for pleasure. I mean, that's first, right? Like, I just want to have an experience of letting it wash over me and really just sitting with it. But it doesn't take me long to toggle over to that mode of, oh, that's interesting. I should try that syntax and something. Or I like the way that they moved or used juxtaposition from stanza A to stanza B. Or, oh, the title's doing some interesting work. I wonder if I could borrow that for an epigraph. So it's impossible to not be like a little magpie scavenging shiny bits when I'm reading a poem.
You're inquisitive, which I think is a really neat way to also just go through the day. In other words, to be and you say this, to be a spy in the world, right? To take that same acquisitiveness and for whatever purpose, but to have that same kind of hunger. Like, wait, how did this work? To take stuff apart. And another thing that struck me is when you talked about reading your work when you were younger, and you might make edits to something you wrote in the past, that you don't, because you don't want to, tell me if I'm butchering this, you don't want to denigrate her choices, meaning the younger version of yourself. I loved that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, this year is the 20th anniversary of my first book of poems being published. So that book came out when I was 28 years old, and they were poems I wrote from age 19 to like 25. So if I look at that first book, Lamp of the Body, I can see a whole lot of things that 48-year-old me would do differently. Like just the commas alone are enough to give me fits. I'm not kidding. I'm like, apparently I had not discovered the beauty of the M dash yet. I look at that book and I think, okay, would I do it differently now? If I received all of those same ideas, would I do it differently now? Yes. Am I tempted at all to revise the poems in that book? No, because that would be erasing the 20-something writer who made those choices. Like every book is a time capsule, right? My memoir is a time capsule, and the version of me who wrote that book lives inside that book and doesn't exist in the world anymore because I'm different now.
Right.
And I think that's the beauty of if you're lucky enough to have a long career, is being able to look at how you made different aesthetic choices over the course of your career, looking how you maybe dealt with some of the same obsessive thematic material, but it came out and kind of surfaced in different ways, and not trying to apply all of your current thinking to your past creations, which just kind of corrupts the thing.
I love the line, I let them stand out of respect. Because for me, who's obsessed with looking back, that sense of respect is, well, it's a couple of things. It's cool because you're paying a debt of honor to yourself, right? Because you're still the same person in a way. I mean, you're still engaged in the same process. It has this, it also kind of affirms whatever choices you're making now, which is that those are genuine and real. So I don't know whether that may have just captured me particularly, but I just love that. I could do this all day, Maggie.
Same. I love to talk about this stuff. I'm a complete geek, so this is perfect.
I think that's it, Maggie.
This was fun.
Thank you so much for spending some of your morning with me.
No, thank you. This was great.
That's it for this month's edition of Gabfest Reads. Our producer is Cheyna Roth. Ben Richmond is Senior Director of Operations of Podcasts. We'll be back next month with another edition of Gabfest Reads. Emily will be in the chair, and she'll be speaking with Sue Dominus, the author of The Family Dynamic. Until then, all three of us will be back in your feed on Thursday with a new episode of the Slate Political Gabfest.
This episode of the Gabfest is brought to you by Discover. Hey, Gabfest listeners, here's some scoop for you. So what is it, you ask? It's that Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. Now, before anyone goes suggesting this is just a rumor, know that there's actual proof this kettle of tea is not only piping hot, but 100% true. So yeah, sometimes it pays to be a little nosy, but it always pays to discover. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report. Learn more at discover.com/credit card.